It is 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and I want to welcome all of you to our webinar this evening. Our webinar is how to enter the exciting field of clinical research in 2025. There are so many things changing, and at the same time, many things are right where they've always been. And today we're going to have a conversation with an amazing colleague, a friend, Lauren Ballina-Chang. Before we get started, I want to introduce myself too. My name's David Silberman. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Clinical Research Fast Track. And we started Clinical Research Fast Track back in 2016. We had our first courses, and the reason was because there was a dire shortage for coordinators and research professionals who we need to run clinical trials. And at that time, there were thousands of open positions. And that fact still persists today. Since 2016, we have trained new people, helped them enter the industry. They are now thriving all over the United States in roles in clinical research. And from that period, we started at the entry-level positions, training people to start in the field. Since that time, we now train people who are at CROs. We're training physicians. We train for pharmaceutical companies, the sponsors, and our business has grown. When we started, we were headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, that's where our home base is. But since that time, we've had classes all over the country. And now, Lauren, we've been training around the world. It used to be I would see you at places like Scottsdale and Dallas.
Mhm.
More recently, I've seen you in places like Mexico, Puerto Rico. We've also trained Brazil, Canada. So exciting to see you now on Zoom. I want to thank you for joining us. Lauren Ballina-Chang is our Vice President of Outreach. Of growth. Wait, what is your title? Lauren, you
I
are
know,
VP
always
of.
evolving, just like this field of clinical research. But thank you, David. I'm really excited for the conversation tonight. And I apologize, I'm just getting over a cold. So if I sound a little stuffy, it's because I am. But I'm so excited to be here. As David said, I'm Lauren Ballina-Chang. I'm our Vice President of Strategic Growth. And really what that means is my goal is to help all of our students to grow in a very strategic way through career coaching, through recognizing opportunities, through understanding when to say yes to an opportunity that will lead to immense growth in this field. I myself fell into clinical research back in 2010. I really had no idea what I was stumbling into. I knew I liked medicine. I knew I liked research. I didn't really understand clinical research at that time and was fortunate to stumble into a position that probably took me way too long to get up to speed because I had no prior training and really no knowledge of what I was getting into. Since then, I've been able to run trials in a variety of therapeutic areas from anesthesia, emergency medicine, pain management, even some psychological trials with PTSD and resiliency. From there, I went on to earn my master's and prior to graduation, found a position at the Mayo Clinic. And there I helped to build new research programs and a very old research infrastructure. So always innovating, always kind of pushing those boundaries. And there I really learned to train others and allow them to be successful in the field. And around that time, several years into my tenure at Mayo Clinic, I stumbled upon Fast Track before Fast Track was even a school. And I taught for our very first class back in 2016 and quickly realized that this is where my passion lies, is in helping others to recognize the potential within themselves, but also the potential in the field of clinical research to go out there, work on the forefront, innovate, and really change medicine. I know a lot of you out there are probably either in healthcare already or want to be in healthcare. And, no matter your situation, the thing I love about research is you're able to find a place pushing those boundaries on the forefront of medicine. So we're going to talk a lot about that this evening, but David, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so Lauren, you mentioned that you were at the Mayo Clinic before coming to Clinical Research Fast Track. I believe you were in the oncology department. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then in the oncology department, you were running clinical trials,
Yeah.
often people, when they hear about clinical research, they have an idea of what it might be. But
Mhm.
before we jump into how do you enter the industry, I actually want to talk a lot about what are we entering into? Like, let's start with the basic question. What is clinical research? How is it different from lab research? What is a clinical trial? How is it different from other types of research?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of preconceived notions that are incorrect about what clinical research is. Most people are going to think, oh, you're at the, the lab bench with your pipette and petri dishes and your lab goggles on and your lab coat. And no, that can be part of clinical research, but that's not at the heart of what we do. And I actually myself got started in basic science research. I was in the rat lab and realized I wanted to work with people. I didn't really want to be in that setting anymore. In clinical research, it's really where science meets medicine, and we are testing new medications, therapies, interventions. Sometimes it's a behavior change, sometimes it's a pill, sometimes it's a patch, sometimes it's a surgery. It's some new innovative intervention on a human person, a participant in this trial. And during the duration of that study, we are collecting data on all the participants to see if our intervention is number one, safe, right? We don't want to give something to someone if it's not safe. We don't want to offer that intervention if it's going to do more harm than good. And then secondarily, we're testing for efficacy. That means, does it work? Is it helping? Is it efficacious? And so these are the two questions we're at the heart of every clinical trial. Is it safe? Number one, always, is it safe? And then number two, is it working? Is it helping? And if those two things are a no, or if even one of those is a no, then really what's the point of offering that to anyone? And of course, we want to offer these interventions to the groups that need them most. The studies are designed in such a way where we enroll these participants to test on the population that needs that intervention, that needs that new high blood pressure medication, or that clot busting compound, or a certain type of surgery done in a certain type of way. So, these studies are designed in very specific ways to answer these questions. And if all goes well, years and years of collecting data and running these interventional trials, we get that data to the FDA and we say, here's what we know so far. We think, based on the data, not even we think, our data shows, it proves that this intervention is safe and that it is efficacious. Can we prescribe this to people? Can this be an on-label treatment for people? Can this be an intervention that we can give in the clinic that doctors can prescribe to their patients?
Okay, so that is what we're talking about. These are clinical trials on human subjects. We're looking at safety and efficacy. I would love again to see a show of hands. Are you in the right place? Is this the type of field that you are looking for? I'm just curious if this, you can go into your toolbar, raise your hand, and um, is this something that you're interested in? Because this isn't lab research, Lauren. This
Nope.
isn't academic research, but it can be at an academic setting. Okay,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, almost every hand. I just see all kinds of hands. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we know this is clinical research, and it happens you were at the Mayo Clinic. That's a big hospital, research hospital.
Right.
But before you were at the Mayo Clinic, weren't you at the university? You were in North Carolina
Yeah.
at a university. So where are these trials happening? They're happening at the Mayo Clinic, at the
Yep.
university. What are the kinds
Yeah.
of places where we're doing clinical research?
Yeah, I mean, these trials take place in a lot of different settings. So we have our what we call academic medical centers. So I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Wherever you are, I'm sure you have a major academic medical center somewhere somewhat close to you at least, right? We think of like the Harvards, Stanfords, these type of big academic medical centers running these trials. But a lot of trials are also run in community-based hospitals. And these are great places to run trials because we're reaching a whole different set of population than we're reaching at our academic medical centers. At our academic medical centers, we often have very specialized, high level cases, right? Patients are seeking care there for a reason. usually there's, they haven't been able to find answers good enough for whatever is wrong. At our community-based centers, we're able to reach different populations. And then there's some physicians in the community that maybe own their own practice or are part of an independent private group. And they say, hey, we want to run clinical research. So it could be run in a doctor's office. No, not every single doctor does this, but a lot of independent physicians will choose to incorporate clinical research into their practice. And then there's another model where it's just an independent, standalone research center where physicians will go to offer their services because there's always an MD or a DO affiliated with every single study. You need that medical professional to head up the running of these studies. The people that work to facilitate the trial don't need those credentials. But sometimes we have these just independent research centers that's all they do every single day, sometimes 365 days a year. They are running these studies, but a lot of them, they're there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, seeing research participants and offering these interventions.
Okay, so we talked about where it's happening. We talked about what clinical research is. I'm going through the 5 questions, right? Now we're going to talk about who are the employers. We talked about these hospitals are the employers, the doctor's office are employers, but there's others involved in the field. And can you talk a little bit about these different organizations? Because if you're talking about entering the field, you want to know where to enter, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to look at a job at this hospital. I'm going to look at the job at these doctors' offices. But what about CROs? Can you explain that? What about sponsors? There's vendors. There's other places too.
Yeah. So let's start by talking about sponsor-initiated research. So if you think of our pharmaceutical companies, there's big and small, there's biotechs, all kind of different ones. So, off the top of my head, think of Pfizer, Lilly, GSK, AbbVie, the kind of these big heavy hitter pharmaceutical companies. And they have individuals there who are doing that lab research, that drug discovery. Say, oh, wow, we've discovered this compound. We think it's medicinal. Let's make it into, drug form. And they go through all the steps to test it prior to these clinical interventions. But we're going to fast forward through all of that. And so these sponsor companies, we call them sponsors in clinical research. Most people know them as pharmaceutical companies. They say, hey, we have this intervention. They have a team of scientists that write the protocol. And then they also have the funding to back running the study. Now, it takes a lot to run a clinical trial, and the sponsor can't possibly do it all on their own for a couple reasons. One, it's a lot of work, and two, if they did it all, there'd be a major conflict of interest. So what they do is they outsource a lot of the work to these organizations called CROs, contract research organizations or clinical research organizations. And nowadays, the term is going to be service provider for these CROs, these contract research organizations. And so these pharmaceutical companies will outsource, they'll contract these CROs to facilitate running the trial on their behalf. Now, the CROs can't do it all either because they are not where the patients go. They are not where the data can be collected. Now, at the CROs, they can help with budgets and contracts. They can help with quality assurance. They can help with monitoring the data. They can help project manage. They can help identify the research organizations where the data can be collected, but they can't collect that data themselves. So now we have another layer to our industry, and it goes down to the research sites, the hospitals, the doctors' offices, the independent research sites. At each of these layers of the industry, I mean, this is why the industry is so enormous and filled with so much opportunity, because at each layer in this whole pyramid we've built, there is opportunity. Because I know some of you are probably thinking, I'd love to be what we call patient facing. I'd love to work with the participants, enroll them in the trials, offer the interventions, collect the data. And some of you are probably thinking, that sounds terrible. I don't want to work with patients. I don't want to be patient facing. Are there still opportunities for me? And at every single level, every single layer of this industry, there are opportunities, no matter if you want to be patient facing or behind the scenes.
So you talked about the sponsors, you talked about the CROs, you talked about the research sites, but there's another area, which is the vendors. And then there's the IRBs and the FDA. There's so many different groups, and all of them need support. They need help, and they need people who can get the job done. This is 2025. everyone's talking about AI. AI is a tool, a resource that we can use to accelerate the development of drugs to come into trial. That means we're going to be really busy this year. We're going to be busier probably than we've ever been. And when we get to the trial, we need people to run those trials. So
Right.
there's going to be opportunities in this field, or you may even want to work for one of those vendor companies that's creating those softwares or helping with the diagnostics or helping in other areas of clinical research. The amount of opportunities, because there's so many different organizations involved, is really enormous. But you have to have certain qualifications to get there. And I think that's probably a question many of you have. And I wanted to bring that up because if you do have a question, you can go into the Q&A or in the chat and type a question. And we want to make sure that by the end we can get to most of your questions. I know we can't get to all of them, but many of people's questions are very similar. And one of the questions people always have is, what qualifications do I need to get in the industry?
Mhm.
Some people might have good backgrounds, and many people, Lauren, have great backgrounds, and they come to me and they say, you know what? I have a great background in science, or
Mm.
they might say I have a great background in healthcare, or they might say I'm motivated, I have a good degree, I'm young, I'm ready to get started, and I've been applying to these roles. But I'm not getting the interviews. I'm not really getting much traction. What are the qualifications you need, Lauren, to get in the
Yeah.
industry? What's the industry looking for?
Well, I mean, I think this speaks to, your question at the heart is like, why is it so hard to get into the field? And we can kind of move into those qualifications and what those barriers are. But I mean, if you think about what we've talked about so far, of what we're doing in this industry, I mean, the importance of working with a human person and giving them a brand new intervention that we don't know if it's going to work. And we think it's going to be safe enough. Otherwise, the ethics committees would not allow us to test it in a human person. But we're still finding that data out. And so when you put yourself in the shoes of these potential employers, they're, of course, nervous when it comes to hiring someone new. There's the trust factor. Can I trust you with my patients? Even if you are behind the scenes, can I trust you with to follow the regulations? Because it's a highly regulated field, of course, right? Can I trust you? And then, of course, we don't want to slow things down by hiring people who don't know what they're doing or won't get up to speed quickly enough, right? Those delays get passed on to the patients. The slower we move in clinical research, the more delays we experience in getting these interventions to the patients that need them most. And so when you put yourself in the place of those potential employers, I hope you can see that there are barriers, there are real barriers to welcoming someone new onto the team. Now, if we never hired anyone new into this field, the field would go extinct because we'd have nobody to run these studies. So, who does get selected to come into the field to learn the ropes? And so that's kind of your question, I think, David, is what are those qualifications? So, no matter where you go to work in this field, you have to be so highly organized, right? If you're the type of person where your closet is arranged by season and color and alphabetically, this might be the right place for
Oh my
you.
gosh, that's so funny, Lauren, because you're talking about what someone's closet looks like. And we had this one vice president, regional vice president for a site network, and she was in charge of the entire western region of the country, and they're running trials all over. And I asked her, her name was Jen. I said, Jen, what do you ask people when you're interviewing them? How do you know if they're the right person? And she asked that exact question. She said, what does your closet look like?
Yeah.
And if you answer, oh my God, I'm so organized. I'm a little bit OCD because everything's organized by color. I got the shoes on the bottom, I got my hats on top, and I've got the long sleeves and the middle sleeves and the short. Like when the people who got more excited about the organization and the detail were the people she knew were going to be great at this field. And I'm wondering, for all of you, raise your hand if you are someone who has that attention to detail, that you love getting into the weeds, that you are super organized.
Lots
Raise
of
your
hands
hand.
going up there. I love it.
I'm just curious. Oh, hands are going up. The people who are a little bit more on it's a compliment in clinical research. If you're a little more neurotic, a little more on the OCD side, we love you. And those hands are going up. It's fantastic. But Lauren, I also want to talk about this different language here. Like, what does that mean? It's a different language. People apply to jobs and they're like, oh, I think I'm qualified. I got a good background, education. I'm not getting the interviews. What is this different language?
Right. So in clinical research, it really is like speaking another language. In an interview, they might ask you, well, what's the time frame to process an SAE and what are the communication channels to report it to the sponsor and IRB? Ooh, some jargon there. What does that mean? Right? I'm throwing out some acronyms here, and you have to be able to speak that language of clinical research. That allows the hiring managers to trust you, right? You're speaking the same language. If you're not speaking the same language, well, how can I know that you're going to do a good job here? Now, when it comes to that data collection, it's done in a very systematic way, and you have to demonstrate that you understand how to follow those protocols. You can collect data on your source per Alcoa C, that you can recruit participants according to the IE laid out in the protocol.
Okay, so
I
stop right
know I'm
there.
getting super jargon heavy, but and I don't mean to scare anyone away because this stuff is not hard to learn, but you have to know it to be successful. And so, I know I'm getting very jargon heavy, but that's to demonstrate that you have to speak this language of clinical research to overcome that barrier to gain the trust of the people interviewing you.
And you know what's funny is the job descriptions talk about experience. They say, oh, we want someone with 2 years experience and 3 years of experience. But really what they mean is we want to hire someone who is comfortable with the language and can hit the ground running. No matter where you're hired in this field, your first 2 or 3 months is what we call onboarding, where you're learning the SOPs or the standard operating practices of that institution. They have different software systems, they have different payroll systems, they have different places where they keep things, and there's a lot of training and onboarding anywhere you go. And they want to make sure that the clinical research side, talking about the IRBs, reporting AEs and SAEs, and the IFC process, all of those you've got. And that is the language. That's really the training that you need. We have a question, and thank you for all of you who are submitting questions. Keep them coming. But I want to address this one right away because this is from someone who's a foreign medical graduate with a green card. And you have me right there. Foreign medical graduates are great candidates for this industry. We have trained hundreds and hundreds who are now working in the field, who are successful in different roles. Some are in the CRC roles and some are in CRA roles. They are working at all levels of the industry. And that medical degree is really helpful, but it doesn't get you in. To get in, you need the training and the support and the connections. So
David, I'm
thank
going to ask
you.
you, sorry, I'm going to pause you right there. I'm going to ask you a question because you're throwing out a lot of lingo there. CRCs and CRAs and regulatory and IRBs. And can you tell everyone a little bit about these different positions in the field? What is a CRA? What's a CRC?
Oh, wait, you're turning the questions on me.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
here we go.
yeah, yeah.
Here we
You're throwing
go.
out all this lingo.
So the roles, the question said, how do I get a CRC role? And that is why I went right there because I feel like whoever asked the question, thank you for that question. You know what a CRC is. CRC is an acronym for Clinical Research Coordinator. And sometimes people see these roles and they might think, oh, that looks like an entry level role. Well, guess what? Some CRCs are not entry level at all. They are high up and they are running the trial, and they are the ones who are responsible for almost all aspects of keeping the trial going. They're enrolling the participants into the trial. They're screening them to make sure they meet the criteria that the protocol dictates. Sorry, I'm trying to use this without too much lingo. And they're scheduling all the visits. They're making sure the diagnostics are happening, that the physician involved is meeting with the participants at the proper time, that they're doing everything from beginning to end. These are the people who really run a trial at a hospital or at a research site. And that's a CRC, or clinical research coordinator. Lauren, did you want to chime in and give any more color on that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you got it right. If you want that patient-facing role, and especially for foreign medical doctors, I think this is always a great position because you're still patient-facing. I know there's probably more FMGs out there, more than the one who asked that question. Um, this is a really great way to keep up your patient contact. Many of you probably want to try to secure a residency spot here in the United States. This is a great bridge to be able to do that, to work in clinical research. And I've worked with many FMGs who actually end up staying in research and forego residency because they love it in this aspect of the field so much. But it's a patient facing role. And so, for those of you who aren't interested in a patient facing role, there's actually probably more opportunity behind the scenes
Wait,
than
but before we leave that patient-facing role, we have another question from an international medical graduate who's been practicing, I guess, internationally for many years. It says 20 years of clinical experience. That's great. Moving into a clinical research coordinator role to start is perfect because you have that patient facing, bedside manner, the knowledge that you can make that connection. And remember, it's the coordinators who really are running the trial at these research hospitals and research sites. So it's a great role for you. But Lauren, we were talking about, what about for people who aren't as interested in that patient-facing role? I mentioned CRA. That was
Yep.
one thing. First of all, what is a CRA? And then what are some other roles people could get into?
I think first focusing more on these entry level positions, because even though you might have years and years of clinical experience, or others of you might be, a well established project manager in a different field, or be very successful in a different field, you have to recognize, well, you're switching gears to move into clinical research. So this is something brand new. If you're looking for an entry level behind the scenes type of position, data coordination is great, right? Where you're kind of in charge of the entering the data, cleaning the data that's been collected at a site. You're really in charge of making sure that is nice and neat and polished and presentable to the sponsor, where so those biostatisticians can look at good, clean, quality data. Other folks love regulatory. I always think of it as maintaining the story of the trial for the FDA. The FDA wants to know how this study ran at every single site. Right now, imagine the number of studies out there, the number of research centers running studies. And so, to keep track of all of the documentation of how the studies ran at each individual site, that is called regulatory. And so there are, a plethora of positions out there focused on that aspect of studies. Um, some of you might be very ethically oriented. You might want to always be doing the right thing, kind of keep your North Star orientation. So, for you, I'd look into IRBs. And this is really those ethics committees that, give either the thumbs up or the thumbs down to be able to move those trials forward to actually offer those interventions. Now, a lot of these positions, people do not stay in very long because there are so much opportunity. And for those of you who raised your hand earlier saying, hey, I'm that person who has high attention to detail, I'm incredibly organized. For some of you also adding on, I'm a great communicator and I can, run things just so, you're not going to stay in those entry level positions very long, right? I mean, in my first position, I was promoted before that 3-month review even came up, right? So when you go out there and you seize the opportunity, it's all about getting started, not really where you start, but it's about getting started to get those promotions. A lot of times people will move up the ranks as a coordinator because they love that patient contact, to even become then maybe a site manager, to then maybe oversee multiple sites and multiple studies. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for growth at the site level. But many people want to be a CRA, and I bet a lot of people in the audience here have heard that CRA or clinical research associate or contract research associate. You'll again hear those interchangeable. And that's a study monitor. They do not see patients. They do not collect data, but what they do is they come into the sites. Colloquially, they're known as road warriors, right? They're racking up their frequent flyer miles and their hotel points, even in today's virtual world, because they travel around to all the research sites to ensure that the data has been collected as it should be, to make sure that the regulatory is reflecting the story of how that study's been run at that site. They're also doing something called IP accountability. So we have this interventional product that we're using, whatever we're testing, and that CRA needs to come in and make sure that those things have been administered appropriately and as prescribed by the study. So, these are just a few roles. Many people then move on to project management or high level data coordination, high level regulatory, where they're overseeing regulatory not just for a site, but for many sites. People move into the sponsor, people help develop protocols. I mean, the opportunities are just absolutely endless. I mean, we could have, a 10-hour conversation just on that.
And endless opportunities. And now let's talk about how do you get in? Because we hear over and over people are applying, they're not getting the interviews. It's so hard to break in, and that's true. And the reason you mentioned was because this is research on human subjects. These are patients coming in, and we're giving them a drug, sometimes for the first time, sometimes we're testing it on a new indication, but these drugs could have what we call adverse effects. And we have to know exactly what to do and how to report it. We have to really understand the FDA rules and regulations. We have to understand the ICH guidelines. Most people don't even know what ICH is. And so, in order to enter this field, even at the entry level, you need to start with training. And the training is going to give you that experience you need. I have a slide that talks about this, and it says, what does that mean by experience? And really, what they mean is you speak the language, you have that training, and that you can build confidence in the hiring manager. This is a field where once you're in the door, then all these new opportunities that Lauren was referring to open up. And these are roles in regulatory, in data management, in coordinating trials, monitoring trials. I mean, the list really goes on, but you want to start in a place where you have the training to get there. It is so critically important. We've talked about these roles, and I know we have a lot of other questions. We have another question about someone with a data background. What are the roles? Let's say you have a background and you're just great with science and data. What are those kinds of roles for someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think data coordination is always a great place to start. This is typically like a site level type of role, but then you can also, depending on your stats background, move into a CRO or a sponsor doing that. If you have a deep understanding of the data, you might also work on the protocol development side because you understand what data needs to be collected to say that we've captured the truth of what's happened here. And that's really what the data collection is all about. So, I mean, those are great places to start. But I know sometimes people, even if they have a strong data background, they might say, "Well, I want to switch it up a little bit. I want to work in regulatory, or I want to be patient facing." And those opportunities are out there to switch lanes a little bit.
Okay, so we've talked about the training needs to get in the field. I want to talk about the support. What does it mean to have a mentor, and why is mentorship so important in this industry, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, to have a mentor, of course, it's someone vouching for you, someone saying that you've mastered this content and you're here for the right reasons, and the things you don't know yet, you will proactively seek out, that you're a problem solver, you're a great communicator. To have a mentor is to have someone in your corner teaching you, guiding you. Sometimes it comes down to some tough love. Sometimes it's that nice warm hug, everywhere in between. Um, I know for us here at Fast Track, our career coaching is a huge part of what we do. And it comes down to this mentorship. So, yes, I always say we got to, help you with what I call the boring stuff, your resume and your cover letter. Everybody needs those things for any job that you apply to. And yes, you need a cover letter. Don't let anyone tell you you don't. Um, but we really focus on sharpening your soft skills as well. So a lot of that's interview prep. David, I know you do some interview prep. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Absolutely. In this day and age, the soft skills are so important. And people, they might have a great science background or a healthcare background, but when we talk about soft skills, what we're talking about is really how you present yourself and your communication skills. And one thing that we work with with our students, and we make sure that our students are ready for every interview, and that means that they have practiced answering the questions that they're going to be asked. Well, first of all, how do you know what's going to be asked? Well, having been in the industry for a long time, we speak with the hiring managers all the time. These are the people who hire at the CROs, at the pharmaceutical companies, and at these sites. Our students are regularly going to interviews, and they come back and they tell us exactly what they were asked. But then we also ask the directors of HR, the directors of talent at these organizations, what are you looking for? And what are the questions you're asking? And so having the opportunity to practice that is invaluable. And that is, I think, so important because the more you practice something, the better you get. It's like that in any, whether you're a musician, musicians practice all the time, right? If you're going into an interview, how often do you practice interviewing? Lauren, do you practice interviewing? Is that something you do?
Well, luckily, I haven't looked for a job for a while. I'm pretty happy where I am. But when you are moving into a new field or a new role, you will be asked these questions, and the hiring managers are looking for certain answers. And within those answers, they're looking for you to use that clinical research language. They're looking for you to use terms like AE and SAE and ICF, right? And if those things, if they're asking you about them and you don't know what that stands for, your chances of getting the job are pretty low. I think another important aspect of mentorship and career coaching are really, teaching someone how to network. Networking is really everything. We touched a little bit earlier on AI, and AI is not going to touch many of these jobs in clinical research. Like, these jobs are completely safe because this is a people oriented industry. You cannot erase people from this field. And as such, people hire people. They don't hire pieces of paper, AKA your resume. They hire someone that they have a connection with. And so we want to focus on building connection before the interview to gain that interview offer. We want to focus on building connection during the interview. We want to focus on maintaining the connection after the interview, whether it's through a thank you video or a phone call or an email or a handwritten note, something I always really love to guide my mentees on. There's so many aspects to maintain that connection. And when you build that connection with someone, often you're going to be their candidate of choice because at the end of the day, who do they want to spend 40 plus hours a week with? Someone that they connect with or someone that they really don't. And so we spend a lot of time teaching and mentoring our students on how to build those connections, on how to network, on how to strike up a conversation with a stranger on LinkedIn to then convert that into an interview offer, right? I mean, that's kind of a skill unto itself.
Also, well, networking is tough. I think it's easy for us to say, but one of the advantages that our training and our students have is we provide a network and a community that they can tap into. Just for example, we have over 2,000 students that we've trained over the past 8 or 9 years. They're working in the industry and they're working at site CROs, sponsors, and vendors all across the industry. So it's nice to have a community that you can reach out to. And that is one of the advantages of going to a program like ours, or one of the advantages of going to like one of these famous universities that you hear about. It's building that network of connections. And then also, the other thing is we talked about mentorship. It's having that support also, because if you are just reaching out to someone completely cold and they don't know you, you don't know them, having the support of a mentor, of people in our program who can actually introduce you to those people, and you have a warm introduction, can make all the difference. So that is something that is incredibly helpful as you're trying to enter into this field. We're almost out of time, and we've asked all these questions. We've talked about the roles, we've talked about the organizations, we've talked about the who, the what, the when, the where, but I want to talk about the why, Lauren. Why is it so important to go through so much trouble to make these connections, to get the training, to do all this? Why is clinical research important to you personally?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Everyone out there will have their own personal why, and if you're not sure what that is, I challenge you to kind of dig deep and figure out what is your why. For me, I always knew I was interested in medicine. I wasn't quite sure where I fit within that. I knew I love science. I studied psychology, so I've always wanted to kind of understand where people are coming from, and always felt a need to help people, but I felt kind of bored and let down by the options that existed of being a bedside nurse or a physician. I felt, and I'm not knocking any of those positions, of course. I mean, everyone out there is doing great work. But for me, myself, I felt I don't want to just offer people what already exists. I want to offer them the best possible thing out there. And that's what clinical research is doing, is trying to find the best possible solutions for people who need those answers. Maybe they don't have a medication that treats their ailments. Maybe what's been tried isn't working. Maybe there's nothing even in existence yet to help people. And I think there is the opportunity of clinical research, and something that's always excited me to work on something that's never been done before. Imagine offering someone an intervention that's never been tested in a human person before. Yes, it's a little scary, but it's also pretty exciting to realize you could be part of history. And so for me, I've always loved being part, of that. I mean, I know sometimes people say, "Oh, those pharma companies, they're just out there to make money and whatnot." But at the end of the day, if we didn't have these medications, devices, therapies, interventions, our health would be so much poorer. Our lifespan expectancy would be so much lower. And so for me, I've always loved being kind of, pushing those boundaries on the forefront of medicine. And so, that's personally why I love it.
Be part of history. Work on the trials that are saving people's lives,
Yeah.
bringing a better tomorrow. That is beautiful. My why is very personal. My mom, she passed away with Alzheimer's, and we have an aging population, and probably many of you know someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, and it's challenging not just for the patient but for the entire family. And I know clinical research is the field that is finding the treatments and the cures that is really one day going to cure dementia, prevent dementia and Alzheimer's, and so many other diseases. And to be a part of an industry like this is absolutely incredible. Before we go, I just want to share a couple more slides because we are entering the future. The future really is today. We have AI that's accelerating drug development, and it's bringing more and more medicines into trial so that we can potentially tackle all of these challenging ailments that we face. We have more trials, we have more opportunity, and we need trained talent. Our next class, Lauren, is coming up February 22nd. There are still spaces available, so if people are interested, please contact us. This is our phone number, 602-883-7944. Don't call now. Everyone is at home with loved ones, having dinner or getting ready for bed. You can email us at contact@clinicalresearchfasttrack.com. Go on our website for more information. But we would just want to thank you all for joining us in our end of January webinar. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It is such a pleasure to have worked with you over these almost 9 years. And we have come so far. We are training physicians, we are training coordinators, we are training the future of our industry. Thank you so much for all you do, Lauren.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in. If you have questions or want to just talk more about the field, please always feel free to give us a call. I could talk about this all day if you can't tell. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
We are out of time, everyone. Happy New Year. Have a wonderful evening, and please contact us tomorrow or next week, and we are happy to answer more questions. Thank you all, and good night.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.